Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IQGEO Capital Markets Day. Throughout today's recorded meeting, attendees online will be on listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. I'd now like to hand over to the management team from IQGEO. Good morning.
Good morning. Is that working? Very good. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Very nice to see you all here today. And a warm welcome to all our online viewers as well. So for those of you not here in London with us, we have about 50 people here in the room. We're at the Cavendish offices, stone's throw from St. Paul's. And for everyone here, we have about 30 people online. So a really nice audience. So we've got a fantastic agenda for you today. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the company and talk about some of the market drivers and what's going on in our markets. But much more important than that is hearing from the people actually leading our businesses around the world. So you'll be hearing from Jay Cadman, who's leading our North American operations. Raf Meersman is leading our European operations. We've got some really interesting customer testimonials, including a live one from Richard Jeffers, who's here in the room as well. And then you'll get to see the software, and we've got a really interesting demo lined up for you later on, followed by Q&A. So IQGEO at a glance. Let me start with just a brief introduction to the management team, because certainly those of you that speak to Hayward and myself regularly, you know a lot about the two of us. But I think it's worth focusing a little bit on the people actually doing the work. So one of the, I think, most important qualities of the team that we have is really the depth of experience they have in markets that we serve. So Jay, Raf, Tom, and James have incredible geospatial skills. So they've been in geospatial markets for the majority of their careers, 20 years plus in some cases. And Jay and Raf and James specifically have only ever done geospatial in telecoms or in utilities. So phenomenal market expertise. And for my money, these are probably the most experienced people available in the market, and they work for us. The other skill set that's prevalent here is experience with cloud technology, cloud delivered enterprise solutions. So that's my background, that's Hayward's background. David, our recently hired CTO, he's in the room. Where's David? He was over there, a friendly chap. Very strong experience in the cloud, long career at Citrix, working with cloud technology there. And Christian, who's not here today, but he runs our APAC region. He has a strong cloud background as well from T-Mobile. So fundamentally, it's a balance between cloud skills and geospatial and utility skills. So a really good team. IQGEO, we're a software company, and we're all about helping network operators build better networks. And our USP, and a theme that we'll come back to throughout the day, is our ability to provide network operators with a single integrated solution that allows them to plan, build, and operate their networks in one single solution. There's a number of reasons that is so important, but what it really all comes back to is productivity. All software is about automation. All software is about driving productivity, and an integrated solution drives productivity, and it drives cost reductions, which for various reasons you'll see that are really important drivers for us. So IQGEO is, we're a global company. Our market is global. And that's really important because when we set out on this venture, we weren't sure that the markets were global. And we now know that they're global. In other words, we sell exactly the same product to exactly the same needs across the world. So in order to do that, we need a global organization. You can see here we have offices in our three key markets, which are North America, Europe, and selected markets in APAC. We're headquartered in Cambridge. Our largest single market is North America, and our largest office in North America, actually our largest office in IQGEO is actually in Denver there, right in the geographic center of the US market. Today, we're very proud to have over 450 customers worldwide of all shapes and sizes, from very largest tier ones right the way down to university campuses, hospitals, cruise ships, and mines. So a really wide variety of users for both our telecoms and our utility solutions. We have over 100,000 users using our product, so it's a well-tried and tested product used in mission-critical situations day in, day out. And today we count over 300 staff and contractors. I think what's important to mention here is that our product is designed for a very specific set of industrial use cases. So it's industrial software. And industrial software is important because it has a very long shelf life. In other words, once it's into our customers, we are engaging in 20-year relationships. This is extremely important. Once it's in and once it's up and running, customers are very loyal to it. The product itself is extremely sticky, and it's very hard to dislodge. So that's important. So these long-term relationships matter to us, and that's one of the reasons that we describe ourselves as a company based on recurring revenue. So our goal is to establish these long-term relationships with long-term recurring revenue in them, because the product's so sticky. All we do is networks, so utility networks and telecom networks. We don't do other geospatial markets, and that allows us to concentrate talent and concentrate expertise and to create walls effectively around us, and this allows us to compete against much larger companies out there. Proven team of industry experts. We're very proud that in the ranks of our company, we have developers and architects and product managers who were around right at the beginning of this market. So the market's about 25 years old, and some of the originators of that market and people that built the first systems that went into this market, now work for us. And again, this allows us to have critical mass in the space and allows us to compete against much larger companies. We sell mostly directly. So we need a lot of, these are complicated solutions to sell. A tier one sale can take 9 to 12 months to go from, the first demo to a closed contract. So we have a lot of expertise in our sales and pre-sales and customer services and customer success teams. So we pay a lot of attention in recruiting that. And as a result of that, we have good control and good visibility over our pipeline, which is one of the reasons, we've done, I think, a good job in meeting the forecasts that are out there for us. But we do have important channel partners, particularly in APAC, where, for example, in Japan, NEC is our key go-to-market partner there, and virtually 90% of our sales in Japan go through them. And we have a growing partner network around the world. Our product is native cloud technology, which is, again, one of our advantages against competition, and hence this on SaaS and cloud technology that I mentioned earlier on the management slide. So this is a slide we're going to be seeing a lot of today. It's the network lifecycle. And the reason it's so important is because this was our big idea. So back when we were trying to shape our identity and shape our product into the market, what we observed was that customers in the telecoms and utilities market were really struggling to digitize their life cycles. The life cycle, the network life cycle, is all of those activities that take a network from the planning phases, from the design phases, from the funding phases, through to being an asset that is generating revenue for the owner. And being able to digitize all of these activities from an IT perspective is probably the single most important technology goal that these companies have, from an organizational perspective. And we're the only company that has done this successfully. And by integrating the life cycle for telecoms and utilities, what we actually do is we displace multiple systems. And this is very important. Displacing those multiple systems creates very significant benefits for our customers. So the goal of this solution here is to drive productivity for our customers. In other words, that allows them to do things faster, to do things with less staff, or to do more things with the same staff. To drive revenue, because an important part of the life cycle here is actually to get customers onto the networks. So we drive revenue, and also to reduce costs. So our ability to reduce technical debt, our ability to do more with less, helps our customers reduce that. So we'll see more of this slide later on, but the concept of aligning ourselves with the network lifecycle is an extremely important one. A few words on industry drivers. So a lot of the case studies we'll be talking about today is telecoms, but I want to stress that there are two really key markets that we go after. And the utilities market is ultimately, and information requirements market is actually probably and more fundamental than the telecoms market. So grid operators in the electricity market are facing a number of really important challenges. Aging infrastructure, this is a big one. In North America, 70% of transmission lines are over 25 years old. These are designed to last 30 to 40 years. Climate change is an extremely important driver, and there's two sides to this. One is the decarbonization, but the other is actually storm damage. And in our main market of North America, there were more billion-dollar storms in 2023 than any year in history. And if you actually observe the number of billion-dollar storms, there's almost straight line growth from the 1980s. So climate change is a really, really visible impact on utilities and on the US economy. These billion-dollar storms cause immense human damage and physical and economic damage. And in the US market in particular, most utilities are above ground, which means they're affected by wind and floods. Decarbonization is an enormous driver as well. So as we electrify transport, as the demand for electricity grows, it's the fastest growing source of energy in the world, decarbonization becomes extremely important. And decarbonization is a particularly important headache for the markets that we serve. In fact, the International Energy Agency estimates that about 3,000 gigawatts, so let me just put that in perspective. So 3,000 gigawatts of solar and wind is in a queue waiting to be connected to the grid. And that is the equivalent of 5 times the entire estate of wind and solar that was live in 2022. So 5 times the amount of what was live in 2022 is waiting to be connected. And that's because decarbonization fundamentally transforms the nature of electricity grids. And the key concept there, or the key change, is that grid operators go from having constant sources of energy to intermittent sources of energy. And so effectively you have to rebuild your grid to cope with intermittent sources of energy. So a tremendous headache. Huge investments are being earmarked, both private and federal, in the North American market. Over 112 billion will be invested over the next 6 years. And I think that's a fraction of what's needed. The IEA Energy Agency reckons that in order for the climate pledges to be met, around 80 million miles of grid need renovating. 80 million miles is equivalent to 100% of the global estate in about 2022. So, a civil engineering project of mind-boggling scale. So grids are growing in complexity. The amount of work they have to do is growing. The legacy systems they're using, built 10, 20 years ago, cannot cope with the volume of work. Input costs are increasing. So serious headaches that require digitalization of the life cycle. In telecoms, we're seeing probably what is the single largest CapEx cycle of investment in the history of telecoms going through as we speak right now. Fiber is a hit with consumers. A lot of networks out there are end of life, so a lot of copper is being pulled out. Coax, also copper, is reaching end of life. There's an increasing amount of competition against the incumbents. huge private and US federal money going into this market. And internal systems are stretched like we see in utility. Time to revenue, something we'll talk about today. Telcos are taking on a lot of debt, a lot of kit, very extended, highly extended logistics chains. So they need to get this stuff generating revenue. 5 minutes, thank you. Higher input costs and a tough investment climate. So again, software that helps these operators do things faster, do things cheaper, and generate revenue faster are in high demand. So we go after a market that is a really significant size. We estimate our market being worth over 2.5 billion ARR, recurring revenue a year. And that's a bottom-up calculation. So we address about 70,500 firms a year. When we classify those by the size and what they could buy from us, what we have is a market that could generate 600 million a year for telco and over 2 billion for utilities. And the picture here is of one of the largest wind turbines in the world. It's the Heliad X, which can power about 16,000 homes, just one turbine. So this is really here just to illustrate the scale of the capex going into these markets. It's vast. So our strategy, just to add a little bit more detail on this, is contained within the network life cycle. But actually within it, there are two quite distinct cycles that we sell towards. So the first is the build cycle. The build cycle in telecoms is highly visible to all of us. Telco operators, fiber operators are out there digging up the streets near where we live. So, I think we've all seen a lot of that. But it is complex and it lends itself really well to automation, particularly on design, which is something Raf will speak about today. But also digitizing the whole sort of office to field process. In the utilities market, there is less of a distinct build phase, right? So whereas in telecoms, they will build a new network next to the old network and turn the old one off. In utilities, they don't do it that way. They kind of replace, upgrade, reinforce as they go along, which is why we don't see whole new networks whole new grids being built alongside the old ones and switching them off. So it's more of a replacement market. And in that context, actually more complex from an engineering perspective, because you've got to keep things running. You've got to keep your customers live while you're upgrading, replacing, and extending your network. But actually of equal importance is the operational cycle, which captures these things here. In utilities, it's particularly complex and extremely well regulated and structured. So there's a lot of planned and unplanned activities that need digitizing and automating that we sell to. And in telecoms, there are, I would say, parallel activities here on planned and unplanned. And in telecoms, there's a very important post-construction event happens, which is sales support. So what's one of the interesting things to me is in telecoms, they have very large sales teams, corporate sales teams, selling broadband and network and redundancy packages to corporate customers out there. Thousands of sales quota carriers there in that market. So these two cycles are important because we need to think about a world where construction starts to slow down or peter off. It won't last forever. I think there's a lot of years left in it. But the operate cycle is just as important, if not more important. So our growth strategy. So we sell subscriptions, as I mentioned earlier. And from a market growth perspective, we're all about winning and then scaling. So land and expand. So one of the questions I often get asked is, do you try and sell everything in one go? Do you try and sell the entire life cycle in one contract? And the answer is no, we don't. Typically, particularly to an established player, we will go and solve a portion of the puzzle, establish a relationship, win trust, and then we expand from there, either expanding the user count of that single use case or opening up other use cases. And so what we see with our customer base is that once a customer has gone live in successive years, there are continuous expansion projects. Hence the importance of these 20-year relationships. We will also innovate. One of the great things that our recent acquisition, Comsoft in Belgium, brings is skills with analytics. Our edition strategy will get a mention today from our product management team, and they'll explain to you how that will help customers go live faster and generate faster recurring revenues. And then bolt-on acquisitions will be an important part of our growth strategy as well. Haywood.
Thank you, Richard. Morning, everyone. Not a lot from me today. No new material financial information. We've reiterated our consensus forecasts that are in the market. But I just thought I'd add a little bit of color around our recurring revenue on our ACV. So recurring revenue over the last 3 years, compound annual growth rate, 65%. At the end of June 23, 114% net retention. So building on what Richard said about land and expand there, we've seen a lot of expansion from our existing customers. And also, we're well diversified. So just over 50.5% of our exit ACV at the end of October, just over £9 million, was from top 20 customers. And the geographic split of those is 9 in North America, 6 in EMEA, 3 in APAC, and 2 in the UK. So if you're thinking about our split of our revenues, we're probably a slightly underrepresentation in the top 20 from North America, because 73% of our total revenues come from the North American base. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, I think we've had some really good customer wins in Europe recently, which I'm sure Raf will talk about. And also we've got a big tail of the OSPI, the sort of tier 3, tier 4 customers, mainly in the North American market. So maybe that's one of the reasons why there's a sort of a EMEA and APAC strongly showing in that top 20 as exit ACV. Just in terms of ACV1, over the last 3 years, compound annual growth rate, 60%. I think somebody said at the end of when we did our first half roadshow, there was a bit of a tail off in the ACV win rate. I mean, we could have said that in the first half of 2020 as well. So I think that overall, 60% compound annual growth rate, and we're looking to continue that trend. Just a little stat that I thought I'd add as well, 54 sales staff at the end of June. That's a 32% compound annual growth rate over the last 3 years. And therefore, overall, there's been an 80% increase in the ACV that each salesperson in the organization is helping us to achieve and win. And when I say sales staff, that's sales management, sales, marketing, pre-sales and technical pre-sales as well. So 54. We invest about 24% of our top line revenues on sales and marketing, and about 14% of our top line revenue on R&D, gross R&D spend. And those are stats that we'll look to continue over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. That's our target that we want to achieve. That's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Haywood. Good morning. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. I'm a Brit, but I speak both languages, so I'll try and translate for you today. So from myself and Raf, you'll get a bit more of a view from the coalface, I think, in terms of what we've got going on in the marketplace. I'll give you a couple of examples. So 3 things I'm going to cover in my session are, one is a practical deployment of automated fiber design and how we take that to the field and how we deploy that at a large tier 1. The growing partner ecosystem, so we see that as a focus in 2024, is how do we expand above and beyond just our solutions and have an integrated ecosystem. And then, as Richard mentioned, the growth in the utility market, we see significant expansion in that marketplace. And although adoption with utilities tends to be a little slower than the telecommunications market, we're starting to see traction in that area now. So those are the 3 areas I will cover. So initially, we deal with a lot of very large telecoms. And so although we can't name the actual customer here, this is one of the most significant telecoms globally. One of the challenges they have at the moment is you'll see multiple different types of telecoms that I'm sure we'll cover in more detail. There's the traditional telecom, which has copper networks out there, who's now trying to expand and overbuild with fiber. You'll see greenfield types of networks out there, significant builds from both major players and small players. And then you'll see people like the cable companies who are either edging out their current network and trying to expand and get as much as they can out of their current coax network and do greenfield builds with fiber, or some like Altice have announced they're just rebuilding their whole fiber network on top of their coax network. So it varies a little bit. This is a traditional telecom company, and they've decided to, where commercially viable, build fiber across the whole of their network, existing copper network. So some of the challenges with that are, well, some of the good news is they generally know where stuff is. So in the US, we have massive amounts of overhead networks, which is very much reliant on pole infrastructure. Not so much over here. Poles are the bane of everyone's life. Permitting, where are they, who owns them, can I put stuff on them? It's a significant challenge in the US market. I think you have a similar challenge, but with duct and underground networks. So that's the first challenge that you have is, what I then need to do is I need to go and decide where to build, where to invest my capital. And so we get asked all the time, I have X amount to build in infrastructure next year, where should I build it? The only way you can really determine this is to do a design, because without an accurate cost, you can't, it's fairly simple math, you can't determine what the payback is. With our customers, we generally see they design and plan 3 times as many homes as they build, which is fine if you're small. You can generally get away with it, although you're probably capital constrained. But if you're very, very large, that creates some significant problems when you're trying to build over 1 million prems per year. That means you have to go plan and design over 3 million homes in order to make that calculation, if you can. And that's where approximations comes and errors, and that's where our automation really starts to shine in terms of the network payback. And as I said, data is always a challenge. You have the Ordnance Survey over here, which is wonderful. We don't have that in the US. I think the English phrase is dog's dinner. It's a real challenge in terms of data, in terms of who do I get it from, where do I share it, and where do I build. So in this particular process, and this is the same for all our major accounts and most of our smaller ones, we take existing infrastructure, so poles, conduit, from wherever we can get it. And there'll be some more significant announcements from large data providers next year, providing generic access to pole data, which will be great. We take street information, and we take addresses. Now, addresses seem simple, they're not. They're incredibly challenging. So the first thing our customers have to do is go walk out every part of the network that they're going to build generally, unless it's really rural information. And that's basically to determine, is there an address here? Is it a commercial address? Is it a residential address? How many units are in this particular building? You cannot rely on the data that you get from third-party sources or in your existing systems. That's where having an integrated field solution is key, because that slows down, it speeds up the generally slow process of getting data from the field back into the machine, which does the automation. So what does this actually mean? So firstly, you have different steps in your process. So the first step is I determine I'm going to build in a certain area. I take my iPad, generally we see out there, I walk out and I go grab that information. Every time they capture a piece of information, that's automatically transmitted back into our system so we can start to do the analysis as soon as possible. So a huge decrease in the time to capture that data, and stops multiple data entries, which are the typical piece of paper sent to India, captured into the information, and obviously issues with data transfer. The second thing is then jumping into automated design that Ralph will cover in more details from a more technical sense. Generally, what we see is a good designer, and there's lots of caveats within here about what are they designing, but generally they can do a home every 2 minutes on average. What we're seeing and what we've shown and proven is we can do 185 homes a minute with our automation engine, and the result is as good or better as a good designer. And more importantly, when you're building 1 million homes during a year, it's consistent. So the consistency is actually what's driving a huge amount of the benefits rather than just the cost by eliminating the manual design process. Because if I'm building 1 million homes, I have to order that. I don't want discrepancies. I don't want some designer in one part of the country designing a network in a completely different way to somebody else in another part. So this drives consistency. It helps with the order flow. It helps reduce supply chain issues as well. So basically what we're working on at the moment is we're completing all of the designs for their 2024 rollout. As soon as we hit January, we start work on their designs for their 2025 rollouts. And they're looking at how do I do 3 million homes, 4 million homes, even 5 million homes in terms of the designs that we produce to make better and better decisions about where to invest capital. And we're seeing this across the board with all the copper providers in the US. Probably got about another 5 years of significant builds we see in that particular marketplace. Second part is our growing partner ecosystem. Obviously, when you work with all these large telecoms, we spend a lot of time integrating to other systems. We're also seeing people starting to look at building solutions on top of our platform. We have a very rich platform, a very comprehensive network digital twin, as Richard mentioned earlier, which lends itself to a number of different applications across the life cycle, from the plan build side over to the operate and the sell and the outage restoration side of things. So I'm going to switch this on, and Nick, one of our partners, can say this an awful lot better than I can, so I'm going to let him describe it.
My name is Nick Pena. I'm Vice President of Fibersmith. We're an engineering firm in Columbia, Missouri. As consulting engineers, we design and help construct a number of aspects of fiber optic networks. And so we use IQGEO every day to design and help model networks that we have designed. Contractors we work with and our clients who are using IQGEO in the field love the mobile application. They think it's honestly the best mobile app that they've used for tracking plant record management. It's wonderful to be able to leave the office with a tablet and have a complete record of the plant that they're walking into. Splicers don't have to beg for splice canister diagrams anymore when they can model the actual trace in the field. It's been a huge time savings. IQGEO is saving our clients money in outage conditions all the time. If there's an outage in a specific market, they're able to take that copy of their plant out in the field, run simulated OTDR traces back from specific patch panel ports. It means that their networks can be brought up faster, which saves them money, stops cancellations. It's a huge savings. Initially, back in the day, when we sent people out to stake or do field collection, we'd send them out with a stack of documents about this thick. Now, since we model these networks in IQGEO, we're able to send them out with a tablet. Like, for example, changes that need to occur, like moving a handhole from one side of the road to the other, or that pole doesn't exist. It really has been a huge benefit to our field collectors, who are very happy not to have to lug around 250 pages. For our clients that are using IQGEO, it's become a big part of how they rely upon it for maintaining their networks. We developed a product called Vision that ingests the plant record from the drop all the way back to the patch panel or the splitter. And so for our clients that are using IQGEO, they wouldn't be able to turn on their subscribers as quickly as possible as they have. It would send them back in time, essentially. We've been using IQGEO for the last 2 years. We see a lot of opportunity for growth and extended integrations between our software and IQGEO.
So Nick is a fantastic example, we think. Nick hosts about 30 customers. So when he says, this thing needs to be reliable, it needs to work, he's on the line. He has SLAs with those customers because he hosts their system and their integrated system. It's also a nice example because they are a software provider as well. And they now provide an integrated solution where they walk in with their logical and provisioning system, integrated with our platform, and offer you an end-to-end kind of ISP in a box. I think I've seen some people advertising that in the UK marketplace. We have about 4 of these types of partners in the US at the moment, expanding, and we expect to see more in the future. Definitely in the tier 3s and 4s where they provide that, but we're starting to see some more on the large players in the market with standardized interfaces to our solutions. So finally, I'll just cover what we're seeing in the utility market. So we have, I think about 25, utility. I'm looking at Hayward to vetted numbers, but 25 utility customers in North America. What we've seen over the last 12 months has been a shift in the major utilities market. So as Richard mentioned, some of us have been in the market for a long time. What we saw about 5 or 6 years ago, even up to 10 years ago, was people coming in and trying to deploy field solutions to do all of their major work. The incumbents of the ADMS, DMS, OMS, so the things that run the network, got frightened and then started basically providing field solutions integrated with their product. Weren't as sophisticated as required in the marketplace, but they basically gave it away to try and block that marketplace. That then takes about 5 or 6 years to play out, and the utilities, we think now, are now starting to see a gap in the marketplace, which that doesn't fit the solution for the field provider, because it's not sophisticated enough and doesn't handle all the other use cases outside of outage and restoration. So we're now seeing a shift back to where we want a performance client with a rich network model and a workflow engine that's being delivered into the field to do as much of the field work as possible in a digital way, and a move from the paper scenarios that we're seeing. And this is playing out. So at the moment, we're actively deploying 3 of the top 40 North American. This is an electric utility. Some of them have gas as well, but predominantly electric has the money. Gas is driven by regulations. So that's where we're seeing most of the aggressive growth in the marketplace. And the reasons for this is, as we said, we deploy and we focus on deploying mobility solutions first that integrate with the office, rather than the kind of legacy providers, which some of us used to work for, where they were deploying office solutions that had a field add-on. We're basically the opposite in order to drive that field work and that complexity. So the 2 areas we're seeing the most significant growth at the moment are in the inspections area. And everyone thinks, oh, inspections are simple. They're not simple. They're very, very complex, and you have an awful lot of regulatory demands that you have to prove that you've seen an asset, tested the asset correctly, especially prevalent with all the climate change and the increased number of storms. So as you know, America is slightly litigious in nature. So any issues in terms of an incident that creates greater outage and fires, etc. We need all of the backup information. We need the photographs. We need the workflows. We need who was it, and are they qualified to have done that inspection. So we're seeing a significant growth in this area in the electric market. For all overhead assets. And it's actually, interestingly, we didn't predict this, but we're seeing a big driver from the transmission side, and then that flowing into the distribution side as time goes on. So that's where we're seeing the most significant growth in 2023 and 2024. And then outage restoration. Obviously, incredibly complex if you have a significant outage to manage all the crews from the other areas, the different field people coming in, the supply chain, and the safety. So what we see, the pickup in the electric market has been slower than the telecom market. We now see it starting to pick up steam, and it's really been driven by the macro providers. It's not necessarily something that we've managed to create a change in the market. It's a bigger shift than that, with the decarbonization and the changes in terms of how the distribution grid is managed. We see a huge shift in this marketplace at the moment, and we're seeing that more and more of these field solutions A great example is a company called CSA, and this is on the smaller provider side. They have now deployed 15 customers with their field solution, and they've done that within 18 months, and with very little assistance from us at all. They just, as a sales leader, it's really nice. They kind of send in an order every so often, which is appreciated. They go out and deploy the solutions into the field, into cooperatives out there, and now are adding more and more applications as time goes on. We've seen that replicated in the larger markets as well. So. Okay, I think my time is up. I've got various signals, so I think I now hand that over to Raf. He'll give you a more overview of our automation and the European market.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Jay. And good morning also from my side. I'm really excited to be here today. More than a year ago, I wouldn't have imagined standing here in front of you. At the time, I was CEO of Comsoft. We were a Belgian-based specialized company. And now I'm part of this marvelous company, and I'm really happy today to present to you, first of all, a little bit of background on where I'm coming from and what's the Comsoft product and what that brings to the IQGEO life cycle story, and then also a bit more about the EMEA market. So, for those who don't know, Comsoft so we've been acquired by IQGEO in August 22, but before that, we were a global leader in our specialized domain, which is basically automated design of networks. So in that life cycle, that is one very specific part where we were the best in class globally. We built this solution for almost 20 years, and we marketed it globally. And again, that fits very much with what Richard also said. We built a solution that from the beginning, we wanted it to fit a global market, because the needs for this kind of design of networks, we saw that it actually existed around the world and that the challenges were similar. And so we managed to sell this solution across the world in more than 50 countries, and more than 100 million homes were designed by our clients with our software. You see some of the big names, and obviously being a company that was founded in Europe, in Belgium, of course, we had a very strong footprint in the European market with companies like Deutsche Telekom, with whom we'll have, for example, a webinar in a couple of weeks, where you can find out more what they're doing with our software, but also some of the other big players in Europe. But actually, when I talked about a global solution, you know, our first big commercial project that we did was in New Zealand, which is basically the other side of the world for us. So that was immediately a proof of our solution fitting really in a global context. Now, what the solution was about is really going back to the very early days when we thought about this idea back in the early 2000s. It was really about revolutionizing the way people would design their networks, because at that time, for sure, it was all about manual designs. And manual designs, which meant a lot of people, maybe some or most of them were starting to go into a digital way, but also in a digital way, you can manually design. The key thing with manual design is that it's a human who's deciding and drawing in a CAD or a GIS platform. I'm gonna ask to put a cable in this part of the street. I'm gonna put a cabinet on this corner of the street. Those are human decisions. What we brought in is automation to take over a lot of this decision making. And what it meant is that it's also a way of standardizing and making these decisions more uniform and rule-based. And we did an interesting thing. So first of all, for those who are not really into this kind of network design, I want to make an analogy that's probably very known to you. If you look at, you need to go from point A to point B with your car, and you get a map with all the congestion of traffic. Suppose from one side of this map to the other side. If you think about the manual process, you would actually have the data maybe on the map, but you would start driving, and if you see ahead there's a congestion, you would probably take a turn to try and avoid that congestion. But you're making local decisions. You're making decisions based on this first part of the map, and you're not knowing whether that will give you actually the best end-to-end travel time. So what they found is that the routing algorithms of a Google or a Waze actually can outperform a manual human driving based on knowledge of a street map with 5 to 20%. So you, on average, you get 5 to 20% faster to your destination, trusting on the algorithms. But that's exactly what we did on designing a network. Only the problem is, I would say, 100 times more complex than driving from A to B. Because the problem we were solving is that you have this area, you have the streets, you have the buildings and the addresses that you want to connect. And then to decide what is an optimal network to cover this whole area is something that is just too difficult for a human mind. There's so many things playing. We did early on some tests where we handed off one specific area with one specific set of rules to 3 experienced designers. And we asked them to design the network manually. What we found out was that we got back 3 different designs, different choices, where to put a cabinet, where to cross the street, all because they were taking different local decisions on the way they designed this network. Now, interesting is that when we calculated the cost associated to each of these designs, we found out that there was easily a variation of 4, 5, 6, 7% between the cheapest and the most expensive one. And it wasn't even consistent, because give another area to the and maybe now the other one is cheaper. It's more based on luck almost. And then when we really were able to create those algorithms after years of fine-tuning them, obviously, as well, we really got to a situation where we could outperform the cheapest manual design by optimizing really the big picture. And you see that that meant a range of, let's say, 4 to 10% consistently able to save on the construction of these networks. That is a huge value. It's a huge value because, of course, the cost to construct these networks is massive. So that brings me to this business values that we can bring as a tool, and why our customers love our tool. When you think about automation, of course, you think about, okay, I need less people or less effort to do the same work. Something Jay also illustrated with the how many homes you can do per minute. But in fact, what we found out is that the biggest value for our customers is in the cost savings of what they're building, and into the consistency and the quality of what comes out. Each time the design is following the rules consistently, and you're building a network that afterwards, in the 20, 30 years you'll be operating the network, gives you a high quality network that is the same wherever you've deployed it. So those are huge values if you compare it also to the level of the investments that these operators are putting into these networks. That gives a high return from optimizing these processes. Now, as I said, we were really excited last year in the summer to join as being Comsoft, the team and the company of IQGEO, because we felt there was a really very good match between what our 2 companies were doing. And the match was based on 3 different parts, 3 different elements. The first one was the match on technology. What I saw being the CEO of Comsoft, of course, we were a niche specialized thing. So for most of our customers, we needed to work with the systems that they had for system of record, network management. They had different systems in place. So we saw all the tools in the market, and we needed to work with all these tools within the different clients. When I then saw some clients that went for IQGEO, I immediately saw this is a platform that is way better than a lot of the systems out there. So it was very clear IQGEO was a technology that I saw as the most interesting one growing into the market from a network management point of view. And like I said, Comsoft was leading in the design side. So it was very complementary technology fitting into that end-to-end life cycle story. And I think that's the real powerful thing, bringing these 2 great technologies together in an integrated solution is really allowing us to be the best in the market from this product point of view. But I also really like the fact that merging with IQGEO organization really also had a very good geographical fit. Of course, we've seen from Jay that we have really great customers, we have great use cases, and there was there's big activities in the North American market. And if you look at prior to the acquisition, you see that IQGEO was very heavily successful on the revenue side in North America, while in EMEA there was still some uncovered territory. And for Comsov, it was the other way around. We were based in Europe, so we have a very strong network and a very strong footprint of customers and connections. Not in the least because I've been personally heavily involved also in the fiber world and fiber community in Europe, which actually led to becoming the president of the FTTH Council about half a year ago. And this is really a platform also. It's a non-profit organization with 160 member companies that stimulate and support the fiber market in Europe. And that is giving me also a lot of visibility and insight into the market in Europe. So it meant also, and I was very pleased to be able then to take on this broader responsibility of building out the EMEA market for IQGEO, the full integrated product suite, which was great for me because until then I was selling a niche solution to my customers. They were very happy, but when they wanted the next step, I could not really offer them. I had to point them to partners. And now I suddenly can expand and give them a lot more functionality from our company. And then the last one, which I think is critical for a successful integration, is a cultural fit. We really have a great mindset within the two teams, a good match of values. And so far the integration has been very smooth, and we're very happy in the way we are collaborating with the joint teams. And that brings me to the opportunities in the EMEA market, which is my responsibility. And over the past year, we've really managed to get a couple of very interesting new deals. And I would like to talk briefly about these three segments, let's say, in the EMEA market. I'll start at the bottom with the utilities. I think for the utilities in EMEA, obviously, we're facing similar challenges as what was mentioned already, the energy transition. One of the things that we've seen in the EMEA market for utilities is definitely a big opportunity and a big need to start digitizing workflows, and the mobility part of IQGEO is a really good match. We have a very interesting customer case there already, and building further on that, we expect to be able to bring that story in the EMEA market on the mobility play also in the coming year into more clients. But also we see this challenge of this complete network reinforcement and how to decarbonize the industry as an interesting opportunity from a more planning and design point of view, because the challenges for those operators are increasing. And in Europe, you also have, maybe a little bit different than in the US, is a growing interest, for example, of district heating as an alternative to gas, to bring hot water from a waste facility into the homes of the neighboring areas. It's amazing that 50% of the heat demand in Europe could be just recuperated from existing heat. It's just one of those domains where we're active to try and see how we can help people make the right decisions into the future of these energy networks, and where we think we can play a role again from a first land and then expand point of view. On the telecom side, we also see the two kind of different segments. The first one is the incumbents, so the traditional telecom players. They do have the existing systems, they have copper networks or coax networks, and they're moving towards fiber. There we are talking to, I would say at least 6 or 7 today of the major 10 incumbent operators in EMEA already, and there's a big interest in our solutions. It's a replacement market in the sense that they all have legacy systems in place, but when they see the abilities that we can bring to the table, there's a high interest to see how we can smoothly transition to a technology like ours with its cloud native and mobile functionalities. And of course, we're already doing a lot of work with them, like Deutsche Telekom, Liberty Global, Vodafone. We're already working with them from a fiber design point of view. And then the last segment I want to highlight here is there is obviously linked to the fiber market also a very interesting new kind of operators in the market which has appeared. What I would call a fiber-only, typically wholesale operators. So in UK, this is typically referred to as the old nets, the city fibers of this world, the Swish fibers of this world. So I think at some point of time there were almost 100 of these operators in the UK building fiber. That will consolidate no way, but it's a very interesting segment with quite a different need, because they don't have the legacy systems, and they also don't necessarily have big teams. They're often very, agile, small, knowledgeable teams, and they want to move fast, and they want to get simple systems in that are quickly to deploy. And of course, there, with our technology, we have a very good fit, and we won several of these accounts, both in the UK and in Europe over the past year. And we think there's a lot more we can do on that segment as well. And for that, there's a small testimonial from a successful customer in this segment.
Hello, good
afternoon. Which we will hear about now.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me apologise for not being able to make it to the day today. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a clash that I couldn't get out of. So, my name is Chris Cope, and I've been operating in the telecoms arena for, I think this is my 30th year, actually, started in 1993. For the last 4 or 5 years, I have been the Chief Technology Officer of Swish Fibre. So I joined Swish in July 2019, and this was before we'd actually secured any funding. So we eventually secured funding in December 2019, just after the general election, and we got £250 million from Fern Fibre to essentially invest in building out fibre networks, full fibre networks, in the market towns around London. So we hit the ground running in January 2020, started recruitment and so on and so forth, building the team. But effectively, from a system stack point of view, from a GIS, from a network design, an ISP, all of that, we basically had a blank piece of paper, and we had to get on with it. So we did a procurement in, I think it was March 2020, for one of the components, which was a GIS platform, and IQGEO was a successful vendor for the GIS platform. Essentially, we're looking for many things in terms of a GIS platform, mobility, containment model, and ease of use and all this kind of stuff. But there were really 3 big main things that we wanted to see from this platform. The first one was that we were entrusted by our investor to deploy, effectively hundreds of millions of pounds of infrastructure into the ground. Now, if you think about the copper network, which is coming to an end now, that's been underground for close to 100 years. So we need to make sure that we know exactly where this infrastructure is. We need to know the quantities so that we don't lose track of things, and we need to know what's connected to what. But most importantly, we need to know that we're entrusting a third party to deploy this infrastructure, many contractors over many towns, all in parallel, and we need to make sure that it's deployed to the right quality. So what we did was we basically created this system and a process where the contractors had to evidence the infrastructure that they built, and depending on what the network component was, whether it was a chamber, a Toby part, a pole, a splice closure, we defined a set of mandated things that they had to capture. So whether it was on a pole, whether it was level, and all this kind of stuff. But also they had to capture photographic evidence. So we entrusted and mandated that the contractors do this. we didn't then have to do it ourselves. We didn't need to have lots of staff that were then overlooking the contractors to do all this work. And effectively, the contractors from the mobile application were able to submit this into our back office. So we had a team of back office people that were looking at the evidence of build, and they were QA approving them or submitting them back for rework. So that was great. The second thing that we really wanted was that we wanted this to be part of an integrated system. So what we did was we connected using APIs, IQGEO, to our other systems, so our BSS and OSS. These are the systems that orchestrate the network and also link into the order journey. So when somebody's actually buying a service and checking whether they can get service at their premise. And we enriched it all by having a very well-defined data model where a premise, an example, was linked through data to the actual network elements that needed to be constructed to build up. So when we were able to track with quality and evidence from our back office that a certain piece of infrastructure or chain of bits of infrastructure were built, we were able to then infer certain state changes on a premise to such an extent that somebody could mark something as being built in the field, and 30 seconds later, that premise could actually then be enabled to be sold on in our back-end systems. So the first one was to be able to track, build to cache, as I call it, or design through to cache. The second one was to integrate into our other systems. The third one was really, we built a network, we've got live customers, we need to support it. So we need to know where everything is. We need to know the quality that it was actually built in the first place and see some photographs of it and what's connected to what. We need the connectivity model so that if a certain piece of infrastructure is actually out, we know how that is connected to other elements and importantly, what customers it impacts if there's a fault. We also need to be able to identify that fault quickly. So there's some features within IQGEO, one of them is called a virtual OTDR, that enable us to quickly pinpoint the location where there might be a fault in that network. So that's the third thing. I guess in this current climate, there's lots of consolidation going on, lots of mergers and acquisitions. There's lots of part-built networks. So a fourth key component, I guess, is that we need to be able to know exactly the state of the network, what infrastructure is deployed where, when, to what quality or what extent of build from a work in progress point of view, and also where all our customers are. So, there's this term in the industry called RFS, ready for service or ready for connection. What premises are ready for connection? Because that infers a value. And also where are the connected customers? Because again, there's more of a value associated with that. And the ability to then connect that into other networks fairly easily. So those are the kind of 3-4 kind of major aspects that we wanted from a GIS platform. And I'm happy to say that, we were really pleased with the outcome. What we deployed with some assistance from IQGEO is a really innovative, well-connected end-to-end platform, and an award-winning one. So we won an innovation award with Swish and IQGEO in 2021, the Inca Gold Award, and I was really pleased to be at Inca on Tuesday, where IQGEO themselves picked up another innovation award. So in summary, our journey with IQGEO has been really good. It's a great team. It's a great piece of software. We've really seen value from it, and Swish has actually, taken a lot of value in the ability to track the network that's been put in the ground for many, many, many years to come. So that's a summary of our experience at IQGEO. Have a great afternoon, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
So obviously what you hear from somebody like Chris is, it's great to hear we're actually able to deliver that value again in that kind of 20-year cooperation way. This is the foundation to work further on and be embedded as the system of trust and the single source of truth for their network data. And it's always great to see customers actually recognizing that after the implementation of our software. And then just to conclude before we go into the break, if you were wondering why he had a pink octopus looking over his shoulder, I think we'll hear a little bit more about octopus after the break from Richard Jaffaris. So I think now we have a 15-minute coffee break, and then we'll be back with more. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. There are refreshments in the room next door, and if I could ask you to come back for 12:15, that'd be great. Thank you. The meeting will recommence in 10 minutes. The meeting will commence shortly. The meeting will commence shortly.
Test 1, 2.
pleasure to introduce a current customer of ours. So Richard Jeffries, he's the CEO of Vitrify. He will also explain that he's got a strategic role at Octopus Investments. Richard is a serial entrepreneur. He's built and sold multiple telecoms companies, both wholesale and retail. A lot of experience out in APAC and also here in the UK. And he's going to walk us through his experience with IQGEO as an asset owner. So we'll get the ownership perspective from Richard. Richard, welcome. Please take it away.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm going to represent two different perspectives in this discussion. The first one is obviously as Vitrify's CEO and founder, but also the wider macro view of what we were intending to do when we created our business within Octopus Investments and the Fern Trading fund management structure that's in place. Interestingly for me, I didn't have the brief. One of our sister companies inside the fund, Swish Fibre, Chris Cope obviously was the previous video before the break. And having not spoken to him since he's made the move over to Kraken Technologies, which is the technology arm of Octopus Energy, he was one of the key sort of foundation members of the organization that started Swish Fibre prior to funding and then took it through its full life cycle up to present day. I'll speak about the Octopus Investments piece in a very limited way. I'll just give you the context. In that role, I'm the operating partner. I deal source and I transact. We've only done 2 deals in the last 4 years. We acquired Vorbos, which is a London-based B2B fibre asset. We did that through just on the edge of the pandemic. And then just after the pandemic or the first lockdown, in terms of trying to remember the calculation of the calendar and the dates, we acquired Giganet, which was a regional ISP in the UK who had a limited fibre build underway but was CapEx constrained before we backed them. Within the portfolio itself and the Fern Trading machine, we had Jurassic Fibre down in the southwest in Devon and Cornwall. We had Swish Fibre typically surrounding the M25 in the home counties with a little bit of build to the northern part of England. You heard Raf reference earlier the AltNet or alternative network construct. They are small entities that have spawned to compete and take market share off the incumbent for our foreign visitors online. So essentially no different in my mind to the regional fibre companies, if you want to use that terminology, in Asia Pacific, the ANZ, or the North American market now with the government funding. So I see them as very similar mechanically. And also their funding structures as well, where you have obviously government investment in some cases to try and drive uptake in the non-profitable areas or the black spots where the network economics don't stack up. So as an organization, 3 billion assets under management within the Fern Fund, digital infrastructure, primarily fibre build, so long-term asset mentality, buy to hold is the mantra that we have within the organization. For those of you who may have had some working knowledge of Octopus as an organization, there's another fund called Bracken, and the Bracken Fund was the entity or the structure that spawned all of the solar and wind farm assets that ultimately have created that very successful renewable portfolio. Just to finish the introduction on the machine of Octopus and Fern and the mechanics of it, Octopus Energy obviously has all of the renewable assets now under its control. And where I interface organizationally with Octopus Energy, and you'll see this in the later slides, is via their Kraken Technologies software platform that has very successfully digitally powered that Octopus Energy business. Some would argue with a broad brush that Vitrify is trying to replicate our sister company's success with our approach to fixed broadband. My key team members there, we've now got a full executive team in place after 2.5 years of operation. And our go-to-market is in 2024 outside of the group structure. Pretty picture for you. I pulled this out of the internal documentation to just help simplify the narrative. There are many, many players out in the market doing portals, doing workflow management. What we're doing is the same, but subtly different. there were two main objectives when we founded the business. The first one was to create a automated platform as best we can, with full automation being the aspiration, but also to create a mechanism, a tool that could rapidly consolidate, or after acquiring, rapidly consolidate fibre or Glassco assets. We see this as a global opportunity. We built the business to serve the UK market after we've served the Fern needs of helping bring together those existing fibre investments, as we've learned earlier, one of whom was already a customer of IQGEO before Vitrify became a customer of IQGEO. And interestingly, we were also a customer of Comsoft, completely independent, obviously, at that time. The acquisition hadn't happened. And I actually had found the RAF machine of Comsoft via the New Zealand relationship you had, which was, 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation on the other side of the planet. I was in Silicon Valley at the time. I wasn't down under. And your reputation preceded you. And then our senior build and design figurehead in the UK had operated extensively with the Belgian teams, and we engaged Comsoft, and this was in the height of the lockdown in 2021. So just terminology, the buy side for us in our lexicon is the retail, call it an ISP if you want to, call it a CSP or a communications service provider if you want to, or call it a future brand who doesn't even operate in the telecom space, wanting a share of wallet in the future. If we can completely simplify the ecosystem and invite other brands to come in and bundle with their existing offerings or loyalty programs in the future, we want to be able to serve them very efficiently. On the sell side, this is more of the mechanics that we're used to in this market. Obviously, Openreach, the incumbent, with their obligations to serve the entire country where feasible with future fibre services as they switch off the legacy copper asset. And then City Fibre, a business that's quite large, quite well funded, over 10 years old, so it has that organisational maturity and scale, and they operate nationally. And then the one that isn't on the slide is obviously now the merged entity of Virgin Media O2, making up the big tier ones. Our aspiration is to serve the Inca. You mentioned that earlier, Raf, obviously the Inca cooperative of members. There was at one point 160 plus alternative networks being built in the United Kingdom. It's just not feasible in the longer term that all of those entities will exist. Consolidation has just begun. We've seen the first acquisitions occur in the UK market, and obviously they're digesting those parts, and I empathise with that challenge because within our business, within the group, we have 4 fibre entities to consolidate. So sell side and buy side, that's how we describe it. We regard a sell side as any network asset owner, not just fibre, but any. And obviously, if they're in a transition journey, as we heard earlier, it's no different to the United States market in the UK. There's a lot of similarities now. Legacy DOCSIS technologies are being switched off, copper assets are being switched off, consolidation of power and utility assets. Richard, I thought your points earlier about how that's being driven and really pushed by climate change, I actually think that's completely applicable to the telecoms market, where you've got aerial or pole-based assets that are subject to the same conditions that their power and utility cousins are. This is the picture internally. The Kraken Technologies tooling is a really, really advanced CRM and a whole lot of other workflow smarts. They've done an amazing job to completely rip apart and simplify the energy space. And over the last 6 or 7 years in the United Kingdom, they've gone from a standing start where the Octopus Energy machine is now #1 in the market. And I absolutely agree with what I hear from inside that organisation. It's attributable to the advanced Kraken technology that will provide all of the CRM and front-end interface to our market opportunity. And Vitrify will sit in the engine room in the context of our group and manage all of the network orchestration, all of the ongoing operational lifecycle management of a fibre connection, from first moment of connect and the complexity of a build activity to, as some of the speakers said in the video earlier, speeding up that revenue recognition, the path to cash from build, not leaving it dormant, driving that interaction. And that is the engine room of IQGEO, and I'll get to that in a later slide, where that subtlety of having accurate data, accessible data, secure data, obviously from our obligations of GDPR and post-Brexit Telecommunications Security Act compliance in the UK, this tooling is advanced. Our partner IQGEO and now Comsoft within it met all of the requirements that we had architecturally, both from a data security and data sovereignty perspective, but also just the philosophy of the organization. And hearing all of your speakers, including the CFO earlier, Hayward, haven't met before in person, but just hearing the way you think and approach the problem is so philosophically aligned to us. If we believe we can automate end to end, that's the aspiration. Using phraseology from Google, expressing the network as code, increasing the data center from the closed environment of a data center to treat the global telco footprint as an extended data center and automate it wherever possible to improve repeatability. You're saying consistency, but for us, we're banging the drum on repeatability. Yes, of course, consistency behind the scenes. Bringing the network economics out into the spotlight. So for us, it's a glass network asset. We've obviously got Swish, which was the video of our CTO and my former colleague, Chris Cope. GigaNet and Cuckoo was one of the entities that we acquired, and I led the charge on that. Jurassic Fiber was about a year older than Swish. And interestingly, the last one bringing up the tail is All Points Fiber. In the name, we had to come up with something that would hopefully be appropriate to consolidate the group. All Points Fiber is now the single entity that's going to catch Swish, GigaNet, and Jurassic and merge them all into All Points Fiber, powered by Vitrify tooling. So in the back room of all of this is IQGEO. At the front end of it, the original design mentality that we went into this with was speed of design, accuracy of design, and cost control. But back to the octopus investments hat, and I'll just leave it at this. Everything else will be about IQGEO, and the mix here is, what does a future asset management plan actually look like in a merged fiber entity where you're potentially repeating the acquisition cycle of Glasgow's or fiber assets? Some small, some big, some mature, some not mature. Where are you going to catch that? Well, the reality is it's always been a blur. Is it the CFO's hurdle to jump, asset management? Typically. But in the case of a fiber organization still in build or acquisition phase, if you don't have a source of truth and you're sitting with the investment management hat on, which is my other hat, and I sit with very advanced finance professionals who are deep in the detail, the speculation of we think we have this many premises passed versus precisely we know that we are at the letterbox or the front gate of that premise. It's not only passed, it's ready to connect. It's ready to serve. It's ready to monetize. So the IQGEO machinery that helps us capture and determine precisely those answers is one of the other big drivers why we selected it. The DNA technologically was why Vitrify selected it. When it comes to the smarts and the mechanics of the platform and the service offering around not just the GIS, but the whole geospatial mix, that was why we're partners. So this is the last on Vitrify's market evolution. We've spent 2 years building in stealth mode. The objective was to bring together the group assets and to power them in a very, very light touch, zero touch, preferably highly automated manner for the life cycle of the asset. And then obviously to really exploit the cloud optionality and the economics, or the favorable economics of microservices and really advanced workflow, and then take our business global. We're on track. We've muscled through the pandemic. We've managed to recruit in full lockdown. We did our deal in full lockdown. Talk about trust. We did our deals with Comsoft and IQGEO in full lockdown. And as we come out of the 2023 window, we're looking into the first half of next year where we will have all of our network assets integrated. We will be collapsing in the old language, 4 GIS systems. So all of the competitors of IQGEO in the mix, and it's being collapsed. Again, Vitrify is the platform to serve this group and all of the other assets that we buy and bring into this group for the future. And in the second half of 2024, that's where we expect most of the data to stabilize, all of the data to be cleansed ultimately, because it's coming from 4 different build machines, 4 different organizational regimes that had different systems and taxonomy. And we'll really put the foot down on automation and acceleration. Will that lead to material job losses? No, it won't. It'll just allow us to scale faster to the national ambition that this group has. And the repurposing of those staff is what I'm excited about. We heard Raf earlier talk about time saved. Time saved on a design is one aspect of it. I'd prefer to sit with the CFO or the investment management team and talk about path to revenue just reduced by half a year. And we monetize the network asset because of your tooling faster. So Vitrify's mission and ultimately the simple objectives that we started out with were to consolidate the group assets, to operate them as a long-term asset in the most automated and controlled and repeatable way. The Telecommunications Security Act is worth mentioning for the investors on the call and in the room. The TSA, when it dropped into law in 2021, is regarded by most in the global industry as probably some of the toughest from a compliance standpoint in the way that you treat your data, both at rest and also when the data is in flight. Notably, for your North American market opportunity, the FCC and their Canadian equivalent, I can't recall their name off the top of my head, the regulators in those markets are both in very advanced stages of replicating the TSA. And we know this for a fact. We're involved, we've had consultations with parties in Canada and North America. And I'll just add to that list as part of the Five Eyes security relationship, which the UK, US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are a part of, they all seem to be replicating to a large extent the Telecommunications Security Act. So worth noting, your compliance is sound as a vendor and a partner. So is ours. So we're happy with our positioning together in the way that our technologies interface via secure and controllable API. And obviously it could be of great leverage and great use for you in the market overseas, particularly those big five, that full compliance in the UK is not an easy thing to achieve. It's certainly a barrier to entry for other software partners and entities out there that are trying to play in the UK market, and you've already achieved it. I mentioned a little earlier about unlocking the network economics benefits earlier. Time to cash, so easy to say, but when you're in a fiber construction activity, it's a lot harder to do. If the data isn't all sequential and structured, it becomes incoherent. I'll just go back to one of the videos earlier. When someone says we are interacting with the geographic information system in the order management cycle, what are they really saying? What they're really saying is you are sitting at home or you're sitting in an enterprise as the chief buyer and procurement, and you are doing a look and book. You are doing a scheduling interaction against a specific location or a location ID against a time calendar slot for probably an installation window of X. Now, the more installation windows of X you can insert into a calendar, the more, from a CFO's perspective, the more revenue recognition you can achieve in a single day or in a single calendar month. Now, for us, traditionally in the United Kingdom, there'd be a half a day slot allocated from the incumbent. If you want your broadband installed, you will take a day off work, whether you like it or not, and they will come in the morning or come in the afternoon, or not. You take the whole day off, they call you at 5 to 5 and say, we'll be there tomorrow, and you have to take a second day off, or you won't get your broadband installed. So now look, that's the cynicism displayed in our marketplace, but it's not the incumbent's fault. It's all of the legacy tooling that can't do what I've just described so simplistically in one of the videos referenced it earlier. Oh, we use it for a look and book. So easy to say, but the mechanics of making that a well-oiled machine to lead to revenue recognition are significant. And IQGEO has delivered all of these outcomes, not only inside Swish, but to their other customers. So we're going to be leveraging that within the group. As Vitrify takes control of the entire subscriber base and all of the network assets, we'll be drawing on all of those existing tools and refinements to those tools as we move forward. The market shift, someone mentioned consolidation earlier. Look, there isn't the space or the market dynamics in the UK to have over 100 alternative networks. It's not a futurist statement to say that they're all going to consolidate in the next 2 to 3 years. The driver for that is just natural economics and behavior, but it's also the cost of capital has just gone up significantly, and most of them are only halfway through their build regimes. Importantly, the build regime is just the first part. The second part is the connection of that spine, as they call it, the physical fiber assets that go past the front door of the building to connect. Let's get into IQGEO. I talked briefly about the known function of a geographic information system. That's great. There's a lot of competitors out there. When you shape them up and price them against the IQGEO stack, they all look much the same. But what's different is the longevity and the future-proof mindset of IQGEO and now CommSoft. We know that when we implement this tooling and this technology, it's going to be bedded in and it's going to have, by design, flexibility to scale globally within a cloud footprint. Private cloud or public cloud. So the optionality is there for large customers. Large tier ones will want it in their private cloud infrastructure. We have to allow for that as Vitrify, as a future partner of some of those tier one ecosystems overseas. But IQGEO has already done this. You've got a global footprint already in place in both telco and utility, and we intend to leverage that. Within the Octopus machine and Fern, our design expenditure is significant. We had 4 different management teams and 4 different build teams and 4 different design teams all out there cranking the handle to try and put an asset in place to serve up to 1 million premises in the UK. There's 29 in total, so it's not a huge market share, but it's enough. And we obviously intend, remember, to serve white label or wholesale services to many, many brands, notably some of the large ones and also some of the small ones. So the mass deployment, someone touched on this earlier in terms of speeding up your build. Well, I'll change the words a little. In my experience, speeding up the connection is the art form, and the path to revenue equation is then answered the quicker you do that. Your payback windows are reduced and so forth. Your penetration rates are larger. The knock-on effect for your business cases are enhanced. To the business case piece, I've never seen, other than recent experience inside Fern and Octopus, I've never seen so much referenceability from finance professionals to a GIS. Half of them don't even know what a GIS is. Now they're learning. But also, as you know, that there's a whole lot more to geospatial and the wider data opportunity here that can be exploited in the future. So seeing finance professionals starting to adapt their thinking that data is now a material asset and should be on the balance sheet. And there's absolutely no doubts in this context, when you strap on a IQGEO stack and you have precise lens across your data asset on a daily or hourly basis, you know, it's simple metric. How many linear meters have we built of spine past premises right now? How many connections right now do we have against that spine asset? What is the percentage to still densify? Someone did mention it earlier, and I'll just enhance that theme. When you've got the granularity that IQGEO's tooling can present, you can go down at a regional level with the normal demographic analysis type activities, which are well understood in telecoms and in utility land. And in real time, you can potentially change an entire build profile or build priority. And you probably wouldn't do it on the spine because you're wanting to pass those premises to have an addressable market to sell. But you will definitely change and pivot around the workforces that are doing the connecting. I've seen in large countries, typically in Canada and North America, where they switch the workforce around the storm season. Tornado Alley and Hurricane Alley down in Florida in the southern basin there, they moved a lot of the workforce to the West Coast, and vice versa. I've seen power companies, not in telco, but when the bushfires were raging on the West Coast in the United States, and I've also seen it in Australia, unfortunately, we moved all of the telecom workforces away from where the danger was for health and safety. But it was driven largely by where could we take this workforce to continue the momentum of monetizing the network asset, or, to your other point, Richard, the operations and maintenance budgets that now are having to be very delicately managed against significant constraints. So automated networks, let's just touch on that one. We philosophically, Vitrify and IQGEO are very joined in the way that we look at data, respect the importance of data and data structures and data management and data security, to the TSA again. And we know that if you don't have that structured data approach, you genuinely cannot scale. That's a known fact. But the other thing is you cannot automate. So when we hear in the marketplace of the evolution of machine learning, which is making great strides at the moment globally, and it's a huge macro political battle for supremacy of not just machine learning prowess, but the eventual artificial intelligence. The jury's out. Everyone's running around saying stick AI on your badge and you'll be able to sell your product for more. I'm not going into that path. I'm just saying at the moment, we acknowledge and respect the benefits of machine learning, and we, Vitrify, cannot begin to employ machine learning tooling, and we have some very advanced tooling, some of the most advanced in this country, I might add. We can't even begin to employ it until we get the data environment secure. Which data environment do I have secure within the challenge of consolidating 4 fibre companies today? Only one. And it's not mine inside Vitrify. Vitrify has been in development and staging for the last 2 years. It's the Swish machine. And the Swish machine had that maturity in the back room linked to all of their existing platforms of OSS and BSS to serve customers. But it was that IQGEO foundation and obviously the ComSoft interaction and the ability for them to crank the handle more efficiently on the design bow wave, as I refer to it, to have a plethora of options out there that the CFO ultimately, working with the heads of operations or whomever that structure in the business is, to adjudicate where the next build and frankly where the next push for revenue is, where the next densification is. So the automated piece of a future network is dependent on the data sets. And we put our vote in IQGEO, which I'm 3 years on nearly from that original decision, I'm very happy with. Organisationally, with the octopus hat back on, I'm very happy that I know that there are key sources of truth within the inventory and the asset management environment of our group. And in the longer term, buying more fibre assets, I also acknowledge that the speed of integration because of these tools is hopefully going to be improved. And then lastly, on the security piece, I touched on it earlier, but you have to acknowledge the importance of this. I didn't mention France. I know RCEP for a fact is replicating the TSA in their market right now. Apparently it's going to run through their parliament early next year. And I'm hearing that the Germans have now put their skates on and are actively looking at this legislation. So for us, having that data security, data compliance, both in residency and also when it's in flight, and having the ability to virtualize those data sets and slice them off is also really powerful. And your team have put a lot of work into that. So I'm speaking partly technically, but mainly financially with these statements for this audience, but also to share that our methodologies are aligned. We believe this is the right way. We've already proven a little bit of success in the way that we've acquired some glass assets in the UK whilst continuing to build and connect. We haven't stopped anything. We've slowed down, which is the natural behaviour. But we hope that we will become a lot faster with these activities moving forward. And that's largely due to the tooling and the approach that we've taken. And if you apply the old financial rule of the 100-day importance of post-acquisition, can you rapidly integrate a business into your organisation decisively, efficiently, safely, not lose revenue, not lose customers? Can you do that? Well, it's extremely difficult in this ecosystem to do. And that's best exhibited for our UK audience with what happened in the 90s. So I'm not going to give everyone a history lesson, but Telewest and NTL and Cable and Wireless and all of the different cable players of the 90s all smashed together eventually. And we know that today as the Virgin Media O2 business. And they are still 23, many friends there. So 23, 24, 25 years later, still running multiple duplicate systems, billing systems, operational support systems, and should we say, not one integrated asset management plan that can tell the O2 owners in Madrid or the Liberty owners in Denver, this is precisely what asset you have at this moment in time. And they don't have that ability, and they never have had because of the sheer size and scope of legacy systems. So I hope that gives you a little bit of colour around the why and the how. We genuinely believe in investing in our data set, and the partnership with IQGEO and now ComSoft is essential for our future success. And without it, I cannot undertake in good faith the future acquisition plan that we have for some of the smaller altnets and some of the larger ones too, hopefully, that will come together. And again, how would I plan or how would I steer our investment management superiors? What do I tell them what to buy first? Do I assess the numbers, what the financials? Most of them pre-revenue. They're not even in break-even stage yet. Or do I actually assess the GIS system that hopefully displays a level of accuracy that's close to ours, but unlikely? And we assess the GIS systems to adjudicate on which an acquisition comes next. And it'll definitely be that scenario moving forward into 2024. Conscious of time, I'm happy to take any questions.
We'll do a Q&A at the end.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Where's the clicker? Hi, good. Is it still morning? Just morning. So, hi everybody. I'm James Wheatley. I'm the head of the product management team for IQGEO, and Matt and myself are going to do a double act. So I'll let Matt introduce himself.
Yep. Morning, everyone. Matt Jones, Chief Solution Architect for the EMEA region, covering utilities and telecoms.
So we've talked a lot about IQGEO and ComSoft and the solutions and stuff and what they do. So we're actually going to show you what they actually look like. So I'm going to set a little bit of the context and explain the value of why, as Richard was just describing, our customers see that value, some of the challenges that we look to solve, and then Matt will show you what that actually looks like in the software. Now, we saw the life cycle, and Richard said right at the beginning, you'll see this a number of times throughout the presentation. If you can't remember it by the end, then you won't have been paying attention. Now, this applies obviously to telecoms and utilities. So this is what we look at from a telecoms perspective, and we've talked about that context there a number of times, and I'll use that as the structure that we go through, as that's one of our main focuses. But some of the business drivers that some of our customers experience, and we've seen some of these talked about today as well, but speed, so time to revenue, doing it quicker, that's one of the key things. It's a very competitive marketplace out there. In some places, in the US particularly, you've got 6 different organizations overbuilding in the same place. So the faster you do it, the quicker you get that customer on the hook. And then once they're on the hook, their tendency to churn and change, as long as you can deliver a good service, is fairly low. So doing it quicker and making sure that you've got the quality of the data, as Richard was saying there, is important. For some other operators, cost reduction is a key aspect as well. So, and I think, again, as Richard said, it's not necessarily about replacing people. It's about getting those people to do other more valuable tasks within their organization. Although in some cases, there are opportunities where there's just manual processes. And if we can speed those up, there's opportunities to reduce that cost significantly. And then simplification. So just doing things simpler. So whether that be IT stacks, mergers and acquisitions is a very common. Multiple systems, lots of costs associated to doing that. If you can collapse all that into one system or one set of systems, that's an awful lot better than multiple things that you're trying to maintain. So from the electric perspective, we're not going to go into a lot of detail here. It looks largely the same. The difference is towards the end of the life cycle there. So that outage response part of it is far more important from a utility perspective. So that's where a lot of our Japanese customers see a lot of the value from our system as well. So from a land and expand perspective, they've got a particular business problem around managing outage response in Japan, and that's where we've been able to carve a very strong market position there and provide them a solution that delivers outage response capabilities for a number of the utilities, electric operators in Japan. And then, of course, that gives us the ability to build out and further expand on our capability there. As I said, so the life cycle applies to both, and the key thing that underpins that, so all of these different processes, you require something that knows about the network. So having that system of record for both the integrated network, which is what we call our telecoms portfolio, and the adaptive grid, which is our utilities portfolio, having that network manager that's the system of record that houses all of that information and data that Richard was just so nicely explaining for us, that's the key thing. And then all these other processes sit on top of that. So we'll look at the planning, construction, operations and maintenance, and the sales and marketing perspective. We'll step through each of those and give you a flavour of what that looks like as well. But before we launch into that, Richard mentioned right at the beginning, he said about our additions strategy. So I'll just like to explain a little bit more about what that actually is and why we have that additions strategy. So we span a broad range of different sizes of operators. So we've got some very small operators, and we've got lots of those in North America, and then we've got some very large operators as well. Now, clearly, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So our addition strategy gives us a way to address those different market sizes. So we offer these 3 different editions. So Insight is a very simple solution, cloud hosted by us, obviously. You get what you're given. There's a pre-configured data model. There's a basic set of capabilities, and it's sufficient for what your needs are typically. And for many cases, that's for people whose they have a network, but that's not the reason why they do business. So a university campus is a great example. They obviously need a network, but they're not trying to sell that network to someone else and take money from that. That's just a means to an end to support their businesses. Other large enterprises similarly. So we've got a large chunk of customers that fit into that mode, and they just simply log in, use the system, capture their fiber network, extend it where they have a new building to their campus or something like that. It's an asset. They need to understand where it is and how it's being used. Then for professional, there's then a group of customers that are a bit more advanced. They probably do own a network that they are trying to monetize, but perhaps from a size and scale, they might be quite small, either from a regional perspective or from a target focused market perspective. So they might have a large geographic footprint, but not many customers on that. So this then gives them the opportunity to tailor the solution a bit more to their specific needs. It gives them some level of configurability that they can tweak things, configure it, make it suit their business, their look and feel, if you like. And then all the way to enterprise, where we've got some of the largest customers that we have. Clearly, they maybe want to deploy in their own private cloud. They don't want it to be hosted by us. So some of our large North American customers would fall into that category. And perhaps they've got lots of legacy systems that they need to integrate with. They need to be able to fully change and modify the system to support their business goals. So that puts them on that enterprise platform. And obviously, you can imagine there's a tiering associated to the pricing there as well. And then there's different options that we can add in, and different modules that we can again land and expand as we grow with that customer. So that's what our additions strategy is all about. So let's take a look at the integrated network in a bit more detail. So we'll start with that planning and design phase. And Raf gave us a great introduction of why the automation piece is important. So I won't go over all the details here, but again, it's that point around the manual designs can be less optimal, they can be inconsistent, and in turn they can contain mistakes. So I will let Matt talk you through.
Thank you, James.
The next bit.
So wait for the video to start. So we're going to start with a scenario in the planning space and show you some of the automated tooling that planners get access to when working with the IQGEO platform. So when you start planning a network, it was mentioned earlier, you'll start with a set of information, and that's typically a set of addresses. So these could be business or residential addresses that you want to serve with fiber. So these are your end customers. You'll also have kind of the linear potential routes in that network you're going to create that could come from things like street center lines or existing infrastructure. So in this example, we've got some street center lines. This is a UK example, so there's a bit of a unique kind of additional input data set, which is OpenReach data that can be rented by alternative operators. So in this case, we have the ability to display that information in the tool. Folks can interrogate it, and then there's some nice tooling to allow you to understand, maybe overlaid on top of Street View or your own captured information, where those existing routes are running, where those chambers are, where those poles are, the situation on the ground, but doing it from the office. So a thing that's going to come through a little theme in my demos here is that when you're working in the office, if you can avoid going to the field, that's a good thing to do. If we think about in the operations space, if you have to send someone to the field, that's going to introduce delay on the restoration of that fault. And it's also going to introduce cost as well. So giving more information to the folks in the office to make informed decisions at every kind of step of that network lifecycle is important. So we have other data sets, other base maps. In the UK, we're fortunate with Ordnance Survey, so they can use that as a backdrop to better understand the area in which they're planning, but other customers in other geographies have their own base map information as well. So when we've kind of collated that information from a variety of sources, it's then time to start working in this kind of automated planning process. And that goes through a number of different steps. And the first step is to take all of that input data and derive a kind of skeleton upon which you can then create a least cost design. So all of the potential routes that could be taken by your cables, all of the potential locations that you could place your equipment are calculated from this tool. And they're all going to have different costs as well. So there's a different cost profile if you're renting OpenReach infrastructure, for example, than if you're digging up the road. So that could have an impact on your ultimate design. So having a look here, we've got that kind of that skeleton or that potential network, and users at this stage can do data cleanup as well. So the quality of the output is dependent on the quality of the input. So at this stage, we're reviewing our input data. We're maybe making some decisions based on our knowledge of the area, or maybe it's a field survey that may have been undertaken at the start of the process. And we've kind of finalized that potential set of routes for this network. The next step is to create a design. And what's great about the ComSoft solution is that it has a set of configurable rules. So as an operator, you'll have a network architecture that you want to deploy. You'll probably have a materials catalog for the types of cables, types of equipment that you want to place, and we're able to configure that. And what is produced is a design that is, as was mentioned earlier, it's going to be consistent as you run it for different areas. You're going to get the same type of design, and the same design rules will be adhered to. And in this little display here, we've got a set of clusters with different homes clustered into different areas based on common equipment that is being kind of proposed to serve those customers. So it gives us a view now, all of our customers are covered and we know where we've got common equipment. And what's really interesting about this is this can play through the whole network lifecycle. So Chris earlier mentioned that having this knowledge of how the network is built and how it's connected is great during the planning and build phase, but also the operations phase, because we now know common dependencies on particular pieces of equipment from particular premises. So if you do have an issue with your network, for example, you can say, well, these customers are potentially going to be impacted by this issue. So kind of zeroing in on the actual network that's produced, we've got all of the conduits, we've got all of the cables, all sized based on those rules that are configured. So some customers want to build extra capacity into their network to serve customers or use cases that haven't been envisaged yet. So they'll build a degree of redundancy into that network, and this will adhere to all of those rules when placing those cables. What's really nice is we've got all of that equipment, and we've also got the connectivity. So here we can see, if we look at our little schematic view, we've got a splitter here which will take one fiber strand or piece of glass coming in, and it will split it out to multiple strands going out. So in this way, you can solve multiple customers from a common fiber as we get further upstream. So again, we can understand that, and we can understand which customers are dependent on which equipment. And we're right down to the fiber level, which is great at the planning stage, but also the build stage, so we know what to do. Also the operations stage, so we know who is dependent on what. And that virtual OTDR that was mentioned, so this is a trace where we simulate the firing of light down a particular fiber strand, and we understand where that light passes through and ends up. We're able to simulate that so we can understand the route to serve a customer or set of customers all the way back up through the network. And this is thanks to the ComSoft engine being able to provide that level of detail. And it's definitely a unique selling point to be able to understand that and then generate different types of reports to help construction operations to say, well, give me a PDF or some other report that I can provide to a third party to show all of the connectivity at this location. Fundamental to the design is understanding the costings. So we can generate a bill of materials from that design and then have a look at that and understand, is this an area that we want to invest in if we're early on in that kind of that planning phase, or ultimately what's it going to cost from a material perspective if we've made the decision and we want to move forward. And that gives us a degree of accountability as well when working with contractors. If you know up front what the material cost should be, as you work through that build process, you can kind of keep track on that and see and kind of minimize overspend. Kind of moving on now to a more manual scenario, because whilst the automation is fantastic and will create these designs and save an awful lot of time, there are ad hoc needs to modify that design or serve new premises, so a new housing estate, for example. And we have all of the tools to allow our planners to do that. And we have some nice productivity tools to make that a fast and performant task for them to achieve. So in this case, if we wanted to build out some new aerial network, we can quickly, via targeted tooling, choose the type of networking or network we want to build, and then via a few clicks, we can create that aerial network. And we have a lot of different productivity tools that we deliver, not just with the product, but for specific customers to make sure that they can quickly do these kind of manual operations to support new developments or to enhance the design that's been created via the automation. And another one of these tools is just this Connect Customer tool, which showing here, we select kind of the customer, we select the serving structure, it'll build everything else for us or for that user. So instead of having to place the equipment and make the connections, it's doing that automatically in a limited number of clicks. So via both the automated engine and then also these low-level telecom specific tooling, we're able to satisfy an awful lot of the needs of our planning user community.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, don't get too close. So Raf covered some of the key points around how this delivers value to the end customers that are using this. So it's not only about speeding up the actual process, as Jay said, for some of the North American customers, it's about reducing the overall cost of the actual network build at the end, which is where the real large numbers can come there. And it's about quality as well. It's all about quality in terms of both the network design that you hand into the field, but then also the network at the end. So the second stage of the life cycle is that you've designed this network. Now you obviously have to go build that thing. So you want to be able to do that predictably because you've probably got multiple teams in many different areas. So you need to have a handle on all of that. These are almost certainly contractors, so they're probably not your employees. So you need to be able to manage that, and you need to understand what's going on, and they need to be able to work through that. So some of the challenges, you can guess that Excel is still probably a tool that some of these organizations are attempting to track rather complex build processes with. There's often handoff between different teams, so the planning team to the construction team can often be clunky, email this, email that kind of thing. So anytime where there's friction within the process, that can introduce delay. So that's eliminating that and having a smooth flow is something to look for. Understanding how things are going, often that's a challenge. Customers, it might be too granular. So the opposite, too aggregated. They can't really see what's happening at a granular level. So if they don't know what's going on, when's that home passed, they can't actually turn that home on and generate revenue from that. Lots of manual processes. I think we saw Nick from Fibersmith talking about sending guys out with 250 pages of paper. That is always going to end up with some errors, some mistakes. It's not a very efficient process. I talked about contractors, getting them into the process, and for the people that are actually trying to manage the overall process as well, getting visibility and understanding across the whole thing is quite a challenge. I think Matt can give us a quick view of what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you, James. So now going to move into a kind of construction scenario, and we're going to start with kind of an office view and the process with which somebody can generate a set of tasks based on a network design to enable them to track the build. So what we would typically start with is we'd start with our design, and in this case, it's the same design that we were working with before, and then we turn that into a construction project. And we have a set of configurable rules that, based on the content of that design, will create a number of tasks. A simple rule could be for every kind of chamber or every manhole, create a structural construction task. For every connection where we're connecting fiber together, create a splicing task. So we can set up those rules, and they can be somewhat dependent upon the operator and what they want to record and what they want to report on. So when we've created this project, what the system will do is it will look at that design and it will create all of the tasks automatically. There's also the opportunity to run this through stages. So if you want to, for example, do all of your civils work first and then do your fiber work later, you could have multiple projects to handle that. So it's very flexible to deliver on what customers would require. When these tasks have been created, again, being a very map-centric platform, we can visually interrogate those to understand where we have tasks. We can do filtering to zero in on particular types of task, be it equipment installation or structural installation or cable pulling. So actually doing the pulling the cable between two different structures, we're able to do all of that. And when we've created all of these tasks, the next step is that we need to assign them to a set of users in order to complete. So we then have a more tabular based view to allow our dispatchers or our operators to say, well, these tasks are the responsibility of this individual or this group of individuals. So in the video earlier, it was mentioned that a number of our customers work with a variety of contractors. So they'd like to get visibility of which contractors are responsible for which particular tasks or construction activities, and what's the state of those tasks. So in this way, we're able to choose certain activities, could be a subset of activities. For example, doing aerial work, so up poles, requires a certain skill set. So maybe it's a particular set of users that those tasks would be assigned to. And ultimately, we can make that assignment individually or as a bulk set of actions. So that's what this is currently showing. It's just assigning all of my tasks to do some structural work, so install chambers, to a particular user. And what I'll then jump over to is a more mobile focused view where a user comes in and says, okay, what is the work that I need to complete? And just at the outset of this video, what I'm highlighting is the fact that all of the tools to interrogate and understand the network are available on the tablet like they were in the office. And this is particularly important because the Fibersmith video earlier and our mobile first approach, it should be possible to visualize your entire network and to make change and to be as productive as possible in the field as well as in the office. So to remove that 250 pages of paper, replace it with a tablet and do all of those same operations, many more operations than you can do on paper. So if we have a look at our work assignment view here, this is where a user comes in and says, okay, well, what are the tasks that I need to complete? And I'm zeroing in here on a specific task. They could have been notified by a push notification or an email to get this task, or just come into the application. And when they select it, they get all the details about that task, and they're able to do common operations to begin with, like finding out where they need to go. And as a geospatial platform, we're able to not just route to an address, but route to an exact asset based on its coordinates. So if you're building a manhole, you're not getting directions to the street, you're getting directions to that manhole, so you can get there and do your work. And you can then feed back that you're on your way, that you've arrived, and the office will have a very clear view, where my users are, how are they getting on, what is the tasks they're working on, are any tasks exceeding their SLA? All of this is possible. Because we started this process with a design, everything is interlinked. So now working this task, I can go straight to the manhole in question and do things like my as-built data collection. So this is where we have our plan, but things don't always go according to plan. So there may be the ability to, or the need to update that network so that you've got a network at the end of this process that you're very confident where it is, how it's built, so you can operate it. So in this case, this user who's working this structural task is actually saying, well, I built the chamber over here. And so they've completed that action. And what's nice is, because we understand that network, we've updated everything that needs to be updated, and the user's just had a simple move operation. So all of the cables, all of the ducts, everything's been updated automatically. All they need to do is say, yeah, the chamber is here. And then there's some nice kind of annotation tooling available to just give the context to the folks in the office about why this was moved. So in this case, maybe there was a tree with a tree preservation order that restricted the ability to place the manhole where we proposed it, so it was moved elsewhere. And this is also important from an accountability perspective for a contractor. To avoid cost overruns, you want to know why has something been built differently to how it was planned, and this provides that oversight. So there needs to be justification for any deviation to the design, because it may have cost implications. If you're moving that manhole a significant distance away, you may have additional civils costs, more materials costs, etc., which the contractor may ultimately bill the operator for. We've also got kind of the ability to communicate with the back office. So there's a dialogue that can be kind of had between the office and field when there's the need for escalations or support. And then, marking it as complete as a final step. And what's important about this is, Richard was mentioning, it's really important to be able to understand the earliest opportunity when you can serve customers. So in this case, when this task is completed, the associated asset build state can be set to complete. And then you've got a very low-level view of what has been built. And then you can say, well, all of this has been built. That means I can start marketing to these customers. And that's what Chris was mentioning earlier, was that, within 30 seconds of something happening in the field, they know, hey, we can start marketing and we can send out, all the information to be able to bring them on as customers. So we're empowering that via, starting from the network plan, play that through construction, and have it, integral to your kind of selling process as well.
Thanks very much, Matt. So I think clearly you can see the value that comes from that. So you're getting that end-to-end view, the real-time feedback of what's happening in the process. You're saving time for the people in the field. They're not having to spend additional time, or even worse, going back out to the field or sending someone out to the field to capture what's actually been built. They can do it at the point in time that they're doing that. And we're also working with some other technology vendors that can utilize some additional technology as well to further accelerate that process as well. Improves efficiency, safety, and the time to market. And as I said right at the beginning, speed is key here. So the faster you can get that customer and on the hook, then the better your bottom line will be. So of course we've designed it, we've built it. Now we've got to operate this network. We built it for a reason. We built it to operate, get customers onto that. And we need to be able to ensure that the network and the processes that support the network maintenance are as efficient as possible as well. So some of the problems that we see here, mean time to repair. So the time it takes when there's been a fault, there's been an issue, the time it takes to get the network back up and running again. If that's excessively long, you're going to get fairly unhappy customers. We all see when our online banking apps go down, and we all get a bit grumpy about that. It's exactly the same if your broadband goes down. You probably all your teenagers in your house are all up in arms, having in total disarray, that they can't get on their latest game anymore. So reducing that and in turn improving your customer service is a very important aspect. You wouldn't believe the simple fact of actually the people in the field actually having access to information about the network. It's very often that they don't, and they rely on ringing someone up and saying, hey, where's this thing actually supposed to be? Or maybe they've got some paper plans in the van that are several years out of date. We've seen all of those sorts of things. A lot of things need to be inspected regularly. Poles are a great example. Obviously, poles can rot, and then they are dangerous if they fall down. So they have to be inspected, and you have to prove that you've done those inspections, and you have to be able to do that effectively and efficiently. And then, just as I say, simply having capability in the field that is actually meaningful and useful to the field engineer is a key challenge. And Matt showed a little bit of that in the previous one, and we'll look at a bit more of that as well.
Okay, so we're now going to move into a demo from a customer system. So this is a large tier 1 operator in North America. And the first thing to mention is that they do use IQGEO for a variety of different use cases. And we're going to dig into kind of 3 of these scenarios during this demonstration now. But It's also important to know that different user communities might need access to different applications. So we have role-based access control so that users, when they log into the system, they only have access to what they need to. So the network in question is for the greater New York area, and this particular operator provides media and internet services to about 3 million different homes in this particular geography. This application is called Node Health, and the idea behind it is that we aggregate data from about 14 different systems to bring together into a kind of a health view of the network down to these different areas that they segment their network into, called nodes. And what we're going to do now is just zero into one of those. So we've done a little search, and that's taken us to one of these locations here. I won't claim to understand all of the information on the left-hand side, but someone in their network operations center, that will be critical information for them to understand the health of the network in this area. And as they start to troubleshoot why this particular node may have an issue, they have access to other data sets to support in that process. So the one that we've turned on here, you can't see it too well, but we've got a series of green dots and also a black dot. So we have a connection to their cable modem termination system. So this is a piece of equipment that sits in every customer premise who's taking that service. It's polled every 15 minutes to understand its health, and we're reporting on that information. Green means everything's okay. Black means the last check, there was an issue. So when there is an issue, or in order to dig in further, we've obviously got access to the network information. So all of the network information and how all of these different customers are served is available to that user. So they've got the network health, they've got the customer kind of device information, and then they've got the actual network itself as well. And then, it can't really be overstated how useful things like Street View are as a way in which to reduce the need to potentially send people to the field or to get an early view on what may be the cause of the issue. So here, if we had an outage in this area, maybe we'd be looking at this tree and saying, okay, it's a year or so ago, but how's our vegetation management strategy? Have we been out recently to trim the trees to make sure that they're not going to impact on the network? And users can take their own photos. We can integrate with other systems as well to get more up-to-date kind of panorama photo information as well, if needed. So assuming that we had triaged an issue in this area, we dug into an account, maybe we'd done some restitution, that could be in the office or the field, we then have the ability to kind of check whether we really have solved that problem. So what's really nice here is we can now, in real time, query all of the devices for a particular area. So in this case, the blue highlighted area there, we've done a check, and we've pinged all of those devices in real time to say, hey, are there any customers that are offline right now? So maybe you've done some restitution work as an engineer, and you want to check that you really have solved the problem and that no one else in the area has been impacted by what you've done. And in this case, we've still got an issue. 14% of those checked have issues. In this case, that's just one of them. All the other ones have reported that everything's okay. So just the ability to run these checks in real time against other systems is very important for these engineers in the field, but also the network operations staff. Jumping over to another application called Top Talkers. I like this application because it's very visual in how it represents data usage on the network. So in this case, we've got a view of all of our different kind of service areas and their loading. And then when we hover over particular icons here, it's showing us where our heavy data users are. An up arrow means upload, down arrow means download, both directions means up and down. So it's identifying where you've got congestion on your network. And why this might be used is, we can have situations where we need to split one of our service areas. And if we do that, we want to make sure that we're balancing our heavy users between the two sides of that split, because there's no use if we're concentrating all of our heavy users into one side. So this is very useful when it comes to those kind of scenarios, but it's a very visual application that gets just the information that people need in front of them. And then the final application I'm going to show here, this is about storm damage assessment. And the reason I like this one is, again, it's very focused. It's designed for field use, and it allows the rapid collection of information in the case of a natural disaster. So in this case, if we pulled up a kind of a storm damage event form, we get targeted information that's required by the user to collect, a mixture of mandatory and optional information, a mixture of different media types. So we can have photos, we could have documents if there are documents, address information is populated automatically, the relationship to the asset is automatically stored as well. And then we can track that through a life cycle as kind of the restitution is made for that particular issue. Another reason that I like this application is when we first deployed it a number of years ago, a storm was forecast, a particular storm, and we turned around this application in 24 hours. So being able to configure the forms to collect, make sure that people had access to it, and then get folks in the field to start collecting data was all within 24 hours. And they've continued to build on that as they've kind of added different things that they want to manage within this application. So for example, the deployment of generators. If power is down, you may want to keep some of your network running by deploying generators. So managing that within the platform and having field users understand, where the generators are, what generators they're responsible for, etc., is very important. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of a customer system and how a number of different user communities find a benefit in it.
Thanks, Matt. So you can see there that having access to that data, not just from IQGEO, but from other systems, but in the same environment, can really speed up that fault restoration process, giving the field technicians the information in their hands in a mobile-first interface. It's nice and easy to use, makes their life much, much easier, and they can get all of that information, improve their situational awareness so they can understand what's going on around them and how it's important. And the whole single platform concept, so it's one place to go. They know that they just need to go to that one place. They don't have to dip in and out of multiple different applications. And of course, the last part of the life cycle is around maximizing the network revenue. So, we've built this we've designed it, we've built it, we're operating it. We actually need to sell services on this network. And for many operators, business to business is a very key component of their revenue stream. So it's not just selling it business to commercial, us as residential consumers, but to small and large businesses. If it takes a long time to generate a quote to do that, then the customer at the end of the line is not going to be very pleased. They're probably going to go to one of your competitors. Often we see that these sorts of fairly simple quoting exercises actually end up with the planning team, and the planning team are obviously trying to deal with network rollouts. So that's an additional challenge. And sometimes some operators have to actually roll a truck to see if that's feasible or not. And then I talked about friction through the process, handing things off from one team to another can be inefficient. And you can often end up with quite a lot of variation in the estimates that are generated. So that can also be a significant challenge.
Okay, thank you, James. So the final scenario we're going to run through is in the sales and marketing space. So here our user community is a little bit different. So here it could be a salesperson, and that salesperson is looking to generate an estimate for a potential customer. So they may be residential, they may be business, they may want fiber, they may want a different network type, but fundamentally they're fielding a request to take service where that particular network provider may not currently have a footprint. So the way that this particular tool works is we would start by providing an address. So this is the address of the prospect. And once that address has been plugged into the system, we can choose the rules for the estimate. This could be the network type, how we want to serve the customer, and some other options. And then what will happen is the estimate will be run and we'll get back a set of options for serving that customer along with a set of costs. So in this example, we've actually got two different options. We've got a least cost option that jumps onto the existing network at the earliest possible opportunity to connect to the tie point in the kind of the green rectangle, which is a cabinet. And then we also have a shorter path option. And when the video jumps to that, you'll see that that takes a different route. And in this case, it's prioritizing distance to that cabinet over cost. So therefore, we've got about a $9,000 difference between these two different scenarios. But it may be that we want to take the shorter path for a particular reason. So we'll come on to in a moment how we can take in information from other prospects in the area that allows a user to make a decision that maybe will take the higher cost option, but it means we'll be able to market to some additional customers along the way. We're now going to tweak the estimate slightly because we're going to modify the network. So the fact that we understand the network means that we understand where we have capacity in the network. So in this example, we have a fiber cable, and we're going to modify the availability so there's no longer availability on that cable. So it's changed on the map, it's very visual. So now we can see that it's red, and we're going to regenerate that estimate. And now when we take a look at the least cost and the shortest path options, they're the same, because we can no longer take that other path because there's no longer capacity in that area. So the engine is able to use information on the network as well as information that's provided by a user, including things like obstacles or attractors, so things to avoid, as well as things to maybe favor. If a particular salesperson knows there's a hot prospect in a particular area, they could say, please take this route. Or if there's a permitting challenge in another area, they could say, please don't take this route. The output from the tool is a set of routes as well. So if we think about this as the start of the sales journey, we can then seamlessly move this through to the planning phase by saying, this is the route we want to take. This is the fiber equipment that we're going to use. And we can move that into engineering very quickly without having multiple phone calls and potentially days or weeks lead time to actually do that handoff from the salesperson through to the engineering and ultimately the delivery part of the organization. So moving into a second scenario here, it's not just for kind of isolated customers that this kind of solution can be deployed. So in this case, we've got a number of different banks, and the bank has started up in a new area, and they've got 8, I think, or 7 or 8 different locations that they want to connect to the network. So we've loaded those addresses from a file that was sent to us by the customer, and we'll zoom to one of these and we can see it. And as we zoom out, we'll see the other locations in this region. And then again, we can configure the rules on the right-hand side to say, what type of network do we want to build? Are we interested in connecting just for maybe internet access, or do they need to be directly connected to each other? What are the rules to serve these particular customers? But again, the engine will go away and it will come back with a set of costed options that the salesperson can then review, maybe give a budgetary estimate right there to this prospect, and hopefully move that sale forward. And if we look at the alternative, or how folks are working now, this may be multiple teams needing to talk to each other, communicate with the GIS department, who may need to look at the records, communicate with the engineering department, who may need to figure out what's a feasible route. Whereas we've come up with, we've got a tool here that is in the hands of the salespeople that is data driven and that can lead to a much quicker response to that customer to stop them going to one of the competitive operators that are kind of running in the area. And finishing off this demo, again, we're looking at the different routes, and then we're coming on to prospects. So what's particularly unique about this tool is if you seed it with address or prospect information, when it's responding with these estimates, it'll also tell you, well, this is the cost to go to this area, and these are the business prospects that you will pass if you built out to this route. So then if that customer decides to go forward, you have an opportunity to market to additional customers and realize some revenue from them as well. And my final part here is that when you've got that level of data, you can start to run analytics to understand, well, what is my addressable market and the cost to address that market for a particular geography. So in this case in Manhattan, what we've done is we've run that analytic based on this engine and based on the network in this area to say, okay, what is the cost to serve each of these premises? And what do I need to charge them monthly to realize a return on my investment for building to them, either 24 or 36 months options. So you can go in there, you can look at this, and when the customer requests service, you can say, well, if we charge this much per month, we'd have a return on our investment after 36 months or 24 months. So it's more of a strategic tool to understand where could you go and how much would it cost for you to do so, and how long would it take you to kind of realize a return on that investment. So again, when we've got that level of data, there's more we can do with it. That's that.
All right, thanks. So I think you can see very clearly there that you can the savings that you can realize from that, accelerating that order to cash process, maximizing the potential revenue, which is a real key differentiator there, and streamlining that overall process. So that brings us to the end of the presentation there. Hopefully that's given you a flavor of both how we solve a lot of those business problems within the telecom space, and obviously the same thing applies in the electric utilities. Slightly different challenges and slightly different values, but conceptually very, very similar about how we can support that end-to-end life cycle. So thanks very much for your time and attention. I think it's, if we have time for some questions.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got time for questions, so if you could raise your hand, I'll give you the microphone, and if I could just invite the presenters for today to just attend next to Richard, that'd be great, and then you can add those questions out where it's appropriate. Thank you. I'll read them out to you online. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So just looking at the competitive environment as well, is there anyone else who can offer the integrated set of solutions that you can? And what does that mean for a customer as well if they end up having to take another piece of software to offer that next kind of step of functionality?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could ask Jay to come up and answer that question. If there's a mic, or is his mic on?
I don't know. Sorry, who asked it? I wasn't turned around. All right. The simple answer is no, there isn't. Does the full scale of things that the guys demonstrated to you there, from the planning, definitely not on the automated planning side. There's only about 3 systems in the world that do anything, and none of them really approach what Comsoft does. So that's why we bought them. That was nice. And then what I'm seeing as a differentiator is really on the construction side of things, being able to manage the tasks in an integrated fashion on the network. The operations side of things, we do some of the most sophisticated things, especially in the cable market. We're really, I feel, ahead in that particular marketplace. And then where I think you'll start to see is driving the revenue side of that, given you know the physical infrastructure and the capacity on the network. So with some of our customers, such as Zayo and people like that, they're really, really focused now on monetizing the network. They're building new network, but it's how do I extract as much revenue as possible from the infrastructure that I've built is really the focus for us. And nobody really kind of touches us. You have to buy 5 or 6 systems to kind of get to that point with other solutions.
One thing to that answer, which is, you know, our larger competitors are trying to go down this route. But this is the advantage of us being mobile first. Most of our competition are mobile second. In other words, their mobile capabilities and their field capabilities are an add-on. And this results in a very cumbersome and complex architecture. These are very heavy lift systems to put in. And, you know, we see very, very high failure rates with these sort of add-on mobile second solutions. Our solution is mobile first, which means the mobile capabilities are native to the system. So we get that office to field and all that workflow capability right out of the box. So our product is much more scalable and much more light touch, much easier to put in. And that gives us a huge competitive advantage.
We already have systems that have many, many more users than almost any other GIS out there in the telecom and the utility space, just because of the nature of the mobility that we do. So it's happened quite rapidly, I would say, in terms of the adoption within the marketplace.
Good stuff. Thank you, Jay. Yes.
Yep. I've got 3 questions, but I'll keep them brief, I promise. I can go one by one, but I'll come back if not. Just following on the competitor point, to understand the supplier list, how many vendors are you typically displacing if a big telco took all of your modules? I think Richard in his piece mentioned 4 into 1. Just wondering how many suppliers you can convert into just one.
Yeah, well, it's not always suppliers. A lot of times in the big tier 1s and tier 2s, they've got homegrown systems that they've kind of cobbled together. So I can think of one example at the moment that we're working on. And I think in the design build space, it's 12, but I would say 7 or 8 of them are homegrown systems that they've built themselves over the last 15 years that you're kind of ripping out and replacing rather than actual necessary other vendors.
But we've competed in RFPs and won RFPs where our competition had to string together 2 or 3 partner solutions to be able to match our one solution. So it's very hard for our competition to provide that end-to-end capabilities without partnering. And with partnering comes a host of problems, not least of which is integration and release management and integration and data challenges. So it's a really hard act to assemble if you haven't built it into your product.
Sure. I'll keep it just to one more then. The mobile count repeatedly, and I think the product then was quite powerful. What's the actual conversion rate then? I mean, it seems quite powerful once you get a telco into the demo stage. So once you get them to demo, what's the sort of rough conversion from that to then?
I'm going to suggest Hayward answers that because he's our
I had one for Hayward.
Good. No, I'll sit down.
I was going to suggest Jay. I think it's. I haven't actually got a firm percentage,
Just rough,
but
yeah.
I would say 80%. Once we get to, certainly when we get to talking to them and demoing, I think it's a very high conversion rate.
Yeah, we've got class.
Do you agree?
Yeah, we've got market-leading functionality. Our product looks great, as you saw today. It demos really well, but something that's really important is that we can do things quickly. And in a competitive environment, that's a tremendous advantage. In other words, in the time we can take customer data and produce a working demonstration of their environment, our competition will request 2, 3, 4, 5 times the amount of time to do the same. So we have an ability to be agile at the point of sale. We have an ability to present solutions that are fast and that are attractive, purchasing software is a very visual process, and so we help our customers see the endpoint and sometimes beyond the endpoint that they imagined really, really quickly. And so from a forecasting perspective, there are markers we look for. We're actually always very encouraged when a customer is taking us to trial. I don't think that's always the case with our competition. But when customers go to trial and we know they're going to start workshopping an environment from that point on, the probability of a sale goes right up. And providing there's budget and providing there's a buying position, a buying process, then we can forecast these deals with very high accuracy.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions in the room, or I'll take a couple online if I may. Had a number of questions around competition, which I think you've very kindly touched on. One here from Ian. How difficult is it for organizations to adapt culturally to the automated fiber planning process from a manual design process?
Raf, yeah, come on up.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You see in our experience that indeed if you take a team that has been manually planning with certain tools for like many years, that there's definitely a challenge in converting them. We've had customers who really rather had to switch teams because it's a different way of working, and you have to adapt to this new way of working. And actually, one of the most successful stories in that domain that we also have from a customer testimonial point of view was one of the operators in UK who took on our tool, and they actually brought on graduates who did not have any experience on designing networks, and they were actually able to scale up that team really quickly in terms of performance, because they were more like digital natives. That was the word I was searching for. So they adapted the way of working a bit quicker than maybe a more traditional thing. So it is something that with our customers we have to look at, that they definitely take into account this change.
That's great, thank you. And then are there any other questions from the room? I would like just to prioritize that. If there aren't any, I'll just move on to this perhaps final question, given that we're on time. Question here around your sales process is, how does your sales process differ when selling to tier 1, tier 2 versus perhaps smaller businesses? Is your value proposition different?
Jay, I'll call you up again and you can describe this in the US.
Tier one's a marathon. I mean, it's so it's much more consultative. It's much more focused on the business process and the constituents that are engaged in that process. So it's it shouldn't be. I don't want to kind of. It's difficult. It's challenging. We have an excellent team that goes in, but it's you must understand telecoms. You must understand the business process. You must understand all aspects of what you're going in to do. So that's kind of at the large tier one level what we deal with, and we have an excellent set of consultants and industry experts, and you can't rush it. It takes time, but when you get there, obviously you move throughout the organization over time. On the shorter end, we have what we call our velocity team, and they're named to kind of as they focus, and they, as James described earlier, we have packaged products that are SaaS based, that are built for purpose, that you can configure and get up and running in a day max, and that's really streamlining the process, and we can get somebody from the time that we present to them to the time that we get to the end result, because we live and breathe telecom, for example. We know what they need, in even as short as a week. So we're talking that sales process is weeks. In the tier one sales process, I mean, quite frankly, it's 9 months. Luckily, we started a couple of years ago, so we're moving through that process. So I think it comes down to, sorry, a little long-winded. I think it comes down to we know what they need in the package. We've been doing this for 20 years. We know what you need out of the box. We know what you're going to need in step 2, step 3, step 4, and we're experts in migrating you off your legacy systems.
I'd add to that, the old adage is true that people buy from people. And so an area where we pay a lot of attention for recruitment purposes is sales and pre-sales and customer success. And in fact, some of our most successful members, employees in those areas, are actually former customers who have come across and speak to our prospects, from a direct experience. And they say, well, when I tried to do what you're trying to do, here's what I found. And this is why IQGEO is a better fit and a better solution for you.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you to all the presenters today. Richard, I know investor feedback will be particularly important to you and to the rest of the board. I'll shortly redirect those on the call to give you their feedback, but perhaps before we wrap up, I could ask you for a few just closing comments.
Yeah, just thank you very much. My job is to make sure that as a company, we generate a good product and a good service. Also that we are an attractive investment for all of you, but also that we are an attractive employer. And high growth is very painful. We've been through 3 years of tumultuous growth, triple-digit growth. And a question I constantly ask myself is, how do we get through this? We operate in an environment of great scarcity. There's never enough people for what we're trying to do. There's always too many choices, too much work. And I think when I observe companies that have got through these dangerous periods and have become world leaders, really what differentiates them is a sense of purpose. And so something I always come back to internally is why what we do matters. And the reasons why what IQGEO does matters is because of the impact we have on lives and on everybody's life. So whether it's education, healthcare, of course, entertainment, military, safety, the impact of what we do is just tremendous. Decarbonization, of course. And I always say to our staff that we're involved in the 2 great missions of our time, which is digital equity and climate change. And if you had to pick 2 things to be spending your time on, these 2 missions are really right up there and will have a long-lasting impact, long beyond the life of this company and our own lives. And so keeping our staff focused on these things really matters, and it helps them put in the hard hours and justify all of the hard work that we do for ourselves. And as a result of that, one of the measures we pay a lot of attention to is ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, and we score very high on that. So last year we were in the high 40s, which compares extremely well to some of the leading companies in the world. So NVIDIA scores in the high 40s, Google and Microsoft score in the mid 30s, Apple scores in the teens, right? So we're right up there with some of the best employers in the world, and that's a track record we're proud of, and that helps us get through this. With all of that, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to all my presenters, Richard Jeffries and all of my guys. Good job, thank you today. And of course, thank you to all of you who made an effort to come out here and see us in person. It's really, really appreciated. And of course, we'll be sticking around for questions and look forward to speaking to you all today. Thank you all very much.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Can I please ask investors online not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Good afternoon to you all.